All right. Good good afternoon, good morning from wherever you are joining in from. It's always a pleasure to host you for these sessions every single time. Thank you so much for joining in today. My name is Busola Ogumbayo, and it's a delight to be your host this afternoon. So I just confirmed that our um, uh, audio is great on YouTube. So thank you again for joining. I'm Busola Ogunbayo and I am your host. All right. Um so today I'm going to be taking you on an amazing journey. I think, I mean, if you had uh looked at the title of the stream, you already have an insight into some of the things that we're going to be looking at together today. So, first of all, I'd like to say this because I know that we've been for a long time sharing updates regarding the Swahili camp. So, and I think it's also important that we let you know that for the time being, we've placed that on a hold, but you can still keep registering because the plan now is to have a wait list. um, of course, if it's something that you're going to be interested in, maybe in December and all that, join the wait list. Let's know exactly what is on your mind. What you're planning for, how many kids you're intending to bring, and all of that. So, the the link to the form is still somewhere here. All right, so you can scan that, and it will be available to you. Let me confirm if that is yes, it is. It's the correct one. So you can click that link and then register for the camp, which will be happening sometimes in the year. But just so you know, that's now a wait list. We're no longer having the camp between the 16th of August and the 20th, as I had earlier been announcing onto you. So that being said about that, let's jump entirely straight up into today's session. So, this is something you know that most diaspora parents have issues with. Of course, it's the value that we also bring to you here on you know uh Ashawa Atari.live. Your kids, you are abroad in Germany, in Brazil, in the United States, and you're really concerned for your kids. I mean, they are not they are not taking up the Yoruba language. One so Yoruba da one the first saw, you know. So what exactly can you do? Of course, some of the things that I'll be sharing with us here are not just things that are idiosyncratic to the Yoruba language. It can be spread across um, you know, if you're trying to get your child to speak any of your native languages. By the way, this stream is called Ashawa and it is powered by Tayari.live. We're a media company that is very big on language learning and some, of course, other aspects of um, business values as well too. But what we focus here basically at Tari Yoruba is the language, the Yoruba language. Restoring that heritage, um, restoring the heritage around speaking Yoruba basically and all that. We've had some amazing streams that I think will be of very use to you that you can check out at some point later on. Has to do with proverbs, some of the indigenous things that are some of the very indigenous things that pertains directly to the Yoruba culture and the Yoruba language. So that being said about that, so let's jump right into what we have for today. So like I said, I know many parents are always within that um, you know that um, should I use the word dilemma now that my kids, they are not speaking the language, the kids not speaking Yoruba and all of that. But I strongly believe that they are, you know, uh, there are deliberate ways that you as a parent can definitely help your child to come up to speed. And I understand that you know the value of having your kids learn the language primarily because you don't want them to just be lost in the diaspora language and all of that, right? So there's definitely a scientific method. I'm saying a systematic approach that you can use that will correctly onboard your kids. Take them away from seeing the language as something they have to comprehend or something that they have to do to impress you or something to the point where they see it as a very productive and production based language in itself that um, it, it's it just flows for them basically. All right. So I'm going to be sharing a couple of things with us and be speaking across three specific areas today. First, I'll be speaking across um, you know, making it clear to you that they are not actually rejecting, Yoruba. They are only choosing what feels easy and more convenient. And you need to know that as a parent that when you are trying to transfer a language and you're experiencing any measure of resistance, it's not because they are rejecting the language. It's primarily just because they are choosing what feels more convenient for them. All right. And the second thing we'll be talking about today is that uh how do you help them to maneuver situations when Yoruba becomes something that they have to hide, right? When they're in social settings where people don't speak like them and all that. So we'll be talking base, touching base on subject matter, and then the third part is your role as a parent, where you have to really help them to you have to stop fighting for them to be compliant with respect to what you're saying, but really starting to help them build a desire for the language, not just you know um I want you to learn this, I want you to, and then everything that they are saying is you know I want you to. I understand how it can be for you as a parent when it feels as though you have exhausted every single thing that you can do to aid them to come up to speed with the language. But you'd also come to really understand the fact that um, people do things because they have realized, not because they are told, right? Or let me say it this way: nobody does anything because really they are told to do so. People do things heartily because they have come to realization. So it's the wisdom around helping them get to the point where they really realize the importance of the language. That's really some of the things that we're going to be sharing today. So I want you to come with me, open your heart, let's learn together. All right. So the first thing that I want you to really realize is this: is that they may not necessarily be rejecting the language, they may not be rejecting Yoruba. Um, you must understand the fact that they are only choosing what feels more easy. Of course, when they step out in school, most of the places where they spend more of their time, depending on if you are not an adult parent. So when I say if you're not an adult parent, what I mean is uh, for example, if you are 70 and your son is maybe 38 or 40, that's an adult to an adult parent. But then if it's a scenario where you are say 30 or 40 and then your child is around like 15, 20, 18, 5, 10, and those other younger ages, right? You must understand the fact that uh, it's just the brain will always, in the midst of searching for things for communication, the brain will always defer to what feels easy, right? And the language, whatever other language that they are speaking, feels easy to them because it's what they have used in their day-to-day activities over and over and again. For example, like schooling, right? English is taught more in schools, or every of the subjects that that is used to gauge their intelligence is taught in English. And of course, no one wants to feel like they're not intelligent. No one wants to feel like they're not good enough. So they are the school subjects that shows or validates to them that they are doing well is taught in English. So that will definitely feel more easy because their physics, chemistry, biology, everything is taught in English, right? So you must understand. I think this is a mental framework that you must understand first of all as a parent, that The challenge is not that they're rejecting the language, they are only choosing to go in the direction of what feels, you know, much more easy to them. Let me quickly read something to us before I proceed with my line of thought. Um, so it's important to know that a child may understand Yoruba perfectly, but still prefer English because English has become the language of school, friends, entertainment, technology, and sometimes even their own inner voice. And that is very important for you to know, right? It's important to know that because uh, it's important, especially this is important because especially language preference can shift as a child grows, right? So, why is that point important? It's important so you know as a parent that you are not dealing with a matter of rejection here, you're dealing with a matter of preference. And preference is always as a product of what someone finds more easy. You understand? It's just a very simple equation. You would, even for you as a parent, you would always defer to what feels easier and hold on to that as your preference. All right. So it's very important. A few things to also notice is that babies don't make a conscious decision rather about which language is better. They basically absorb whatever language surrounds them. So preschoolers, for an example, may be happy to use Yoruba because uh, in their home has also become a primary social world to them, right? The school introduces a much larger English speaking environment, and then by adolescence, for every person, their biggest influence now becomes the friends, the entertainment, the media. And if all of those things, the language in which all of those things communicate, honestly, would become their first go to. All right. So I want you to keep this in mind amongst everything that I've said. I want you to keep this in mind. Your child is not rejecting Yoruba. Your child is simply, uh, simply just picking what's easy. All right. Your child is not rejecting Yoruba. Your child is just, I mean, for them, Yoruba has just, should I say, become a language that maybe Yoruba has not really become that language that helps them to participate in the world that they currently live in, right? That's it. I was saying something the other time about how the um, language that they hear in their inner voice, and I think that's even very important. It was while I was actually preparing for this session that actually dawned on me that it's very important because everyone would always tilt more towards the language of their inner voice as well. Of course, the language of their inner voice would primarily be the language that they've surrounded themselves with over and over and again. All right. So it's important for you to know that they are not rejecting the language. It's basically just because they've come to a point where Yoruba is no longer helping them to really participate in the world that they currently live in. It's very, very important. So the next thing you must also understand is this is that understanding Yoruba is not the same thing as speaking it, right? You should this is very important. You should understand the fact that understanding the language is not the same as speaking about. Quick thought on this: you must also understand the fact that um, resistance changes with age, right? I said that before. Between 0 and 5, Yoruba feels more natural when it dominates their home life, and that is primarily your responsibility because that age, social life for the kids really tilts more towards the home before they really start getting convenient with their friends in school, and they are looking forward to going to school, traveling to universities and all of that, to their universities. But it's important that you should know that between this um between this bracket 0 and 5, right, the Yoruba will feel natural to them if that is what you speak around the house, right? So between 6 and 12, schools, friend, entertainment now begin to compete for attention. Now they find a safe zone, within those communities, their school, their friends, and all that, right? So by 13 plus, autonomy, identity, and belonging become increasingly important. All right. So a gentle guide, not a rigid rule. Language acquisition never truly stops. So that in itself is to make you know that, hey, don't don't over, don't feel over triggered, or don't feel the urgency to, I need to get this thing across to them very quick, or else they are not going to learn it. There's an urgency around it that, of course, even for us as Atari.Live or at Atari.Live, we're evangelists of. We know that it's important that the earlier the child knows the language, honestly, the better, right? But it's still true that it's never too late. So um, treat it with some measure of balanced urgency. All right, so it's very important. So the next thing that I want to mention is, uh, under knowing the fact that they may not be rejecting the language, is that understanding and speaking the language are two different things, right? So the goal is not simply more correction. The goal is more meaningful opportunity to speak, right? More meaningful opportunity to speak, and I think that is very, very important. So, a very common pattern with most Yoruba parents, like when they begin to have questions like, "Why are my kids not speaking Yoruba?" You speak Yoruba. Maybe, of course, if they understand, they respond in English, and you're like, "Can't you speak? Can't you speak Yoruba?" But you must understand the fact that that transition of getting them to really be able to speak is your responsibility, right? It's your responsibility. Let me read what I have here. So, um, the child has developed. So let me go over that again. Yoruba, understanding Yoruba isn't the same as speaking Yoruba. A very common diaspora pattern is, parents, why don't you speak? The child understands everything, and child answers everything in English. But don't automatically interpret this as a failure. It's very important. I want you to feel very safe during this period of helping your child to come into learning how to speak Yoruba, right? Don't assume that's a failure. I know that a lot of times you are in social communities and people begin to say things like, "Ọmọ ẹni yìí, òyìnbó òyìnbó nìkan ló ń sọ." I think to a very large extent, if you can actually even get your child to understand, that's some measure of high level progress that you need to pat yourself on the back for, right? High level progress that you need to pat yourself on the back for. So you don't assume that, you know you speak in Yoruba, they understand, and then they respond to you in English. Don't take that as a failure. All right. The thing for the time being is that the child has developed an asymmetry, right? Where Yoruba is more like a language for comprehension, and then English is a language for production, right? Meaning their brain has to do that work of understanding what you need to get them to do, and the easiest way for them to really let you know that they've understood what you are saying is by speaking English. All right. You must understand the fact that the goal is therefore not simply making it's not simply make them answer in Yoruba. It's to gradually create more situations or scenarios where speaking Yoruba is useful, enjoyable, and meaningful. You understand? So for you as a parent, uh, um, you may need to be you will need to be very patient, right? Because that transition requires some measure of patience. And like I said, I don't want you to interpret in your mind that um, because for a long window, for a long time, when you speak, they respond with they respond with Yoruba. That doesn't mean that they respond with English, rather. Forgive me, because they respond with English doesn't mean that's a failure. As long as you're getting them to understand, at least at that fundamental level, that's a huge progress you must pat yourself in the back for. All right, it's very important. For all of our viewers, please kindly let me know exactly where you're watching from, and then leave a word. Let's know exactly where you're watching from, and let me know your thoughts on some of these things that we are also sharing on the stream as well. Too. So let's go to the next thing. All right. So this is one thing, of course, with um with children that as parents you will need to really deal with, right? Uh, One of the reasons they honestly are not maybe taking it serious is because they don't want to sound different, right? There are places that they consider places that matters to them. Of course, primarily when they now get to that age brackets that I mentioned, that 6 to 12 and then 13 plus, right? They want to do every single thing that makes them socially acceptable. You understand? So if you look at this diagram that I have here right now, it says children possess a powerful biological drive to belong. The dominant language becomes the socially safe choice, right? Listen to that. The dominant language becomes the socially safe choice, right? So what that speaks to is the extent to which your child finds a place very convenient for them is to the degree with which they will begin to, it really is about knowing that the language has social value, right? It has social value. Of course, they are not going to get to speak a lot of Yoruba in school. Maybe among some of the friends they begin to make, depending on where they make them, if their friends are more of people in school, or depending if the environment you live in is not an environment that allows them to go out to play with other kids, interact with other kids. Um, you know, if it is really a very tightened environment where they are indoors from school, indoors, then maybe you go to church or whatever places that extra places that you go to outside of their school and then their home and all that. If the predominant language in that environment is not Yoruba, you know what that means for you already. It means basically that uh, the responsibility of showing to them that the language has social value is heavily reliant on you. All right, is heavily reliant on you. Um, you 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 as a parent would be the one to really do that hard work to really help them know that um, you know of course, when your own friends then come to the house and they interact with the kids, to a large extent, you may want to be very deliberate, in asking them to make sure that, um, as they interact with the kids, no laughing at their accent. I don't want to get ahead of myself. All right. I don't want to get up my head of myself. Right. So it's important that you would help them to know that the language is not something that they should hide, even when it seems as though yes and when I say it's important you help them know, I don't mean sit them down, educate them, talk to them. No, not that kind of lecture approach thing, right? Because they will already build a defense against that, right? It really just has to do with helping them to know that um you know the language has social value. It does. It does, right? It does. Really, that's your. So let me put a bit of a thing, some of the things forward that I put together. Research has repeatedly connected heritage language experiences with identity, family relationships, and belonging. Where studies of immigrant families also documents the effect of shame, social pressure, and dominant language ideologies. All right. So the issue isn't that the children don't value the Yoruba. Like I said, it's sometimes because they have just learned that speaking speaking Yoruba when they are not at home has a social cost, right? And this is one of the things that you want to make sure that when your friends come, they help you help them balance it out, right? Balance it out in the sense that when they are when they're in that environment, because I want to believe in diaspora families like that, you're going to have other families as well so that you connect with, you visit yourself, once in a while. When they see in those settings the flow of Yoruba, the value, how you guys are exchanging the words, and nobody's laughing at them for speaking what they know, they begin to know that, oh, this language actually has social value. As much as in school, when they're having their prom party or whatever things that they have that doesn't happen in the home setting, and in that joyful environment that you have created, they know that at least in that environment, it's of value. All right. So it's very important. Um, it's very important that you know that one of the reasons, of course, while that shame factor comes in, is because in that nobody speaks like this, you know, in those places that they belong, right? So it's your responsibility as a parent to help them really navigate this orbital correctly. All right. So that being said about that, so basically this is the psychology around how the entire shame thing works, right? So how shame takes root is, uh, public correction. Someone laughs at their pronunciation, embarrassment. They feel not good enough. When they are friends are basically speaking English and all that, and then from there it moves to avoidance, hesitation to try because of the last two stages, right? The public mockery, the embarrassment in in the places where they feel socially safe. This is why I can't over stress how important it is for you as a parent to make sure that your home is socially safe for your child. Remember, the child is not rejecting the language. They're only going for what seems very easy and very convenient. And if you can keep this at the front of your mind, you do every single thing to make sure that everywhere, which of course your home number one. But I was about to say that everywhere that the language is being used, feels very socially safe for them too. But I think you don't have control over those environments. The one you have real control over is the direct environment that you live in with your own child. All right. So what happens is the mockery stage, you start feeling embarrassed, and then avoidance. Of course, withdrawal is the next. When anyone feels embarrassed about anything, they begin to withdraw, and then silence, and then you know the language is locked away. They would even understand a lot of things that you are saying along the line, but they're not going to make any effort to participate. All right. So it's important that you should help them to handle that. So next thing that I have here is the parental shift, connection before correction, right? So how do you help them to navigate that entire shame environment? We're still going to talk heavily about this, right? So I have here the trap, the pressure trap, and the safe net. So what you don't want to do that will make them pressured, right? I'm saying this because I've seen these things happen at some micro level, right? So you don't want to go, why don't you speak Yoruba? Your Yoruba is terrible. I mean, look at your cause comparison, particularly this last one. Don't be tempted to let your child feel like you have a preference above them with respect to this language speaking thing. Don't do it. All right. It's important that you push them, of course, but they must feel safe around you with respect to what they have known, at least fundamentally. All right. So what you want to do is, you know, wow, nice. You tried. Exactly. Then you go, okay, let's say it together again. All right. And then when they try to say what they say, and if the intonation is not like really, really clear, you make it clear to them, oh, I understood what you're saying. You get what I'm trying to say. So it's very important. This is really how you can help them connect. I think the goal here, if you're really following, the load bearing idea behind all of this is to understand the fact that you need to create that convenience for your child, right? You need to really create that convenience. So give them reasons to speak, not instructions to speak, right? Give them reasons. So you must live in so the Yoruba for them must live in enjoyable experiences, not just in lessons and correction. So we have some game ideas here at Tayari.Live that will be very useful to you and the family. Games, play. In the Proverbs series, there are 5 tips that I mentioned there that I think you want to check out. That would also be helpful to really help you bring your child up to speed. So play Yoruba music, good music, and music that will really help their moral, their moral stature and all that. Good music, of course, the Yoruba food, the stories, families, and jokes in Yoruba, and all of that. I think all of this all together, once you can, to a very large extent, if you can really, really, as a parent, master that, creating that environment that helps them to speak, that gives them reasons to speak it, right? I said something in one of our lives about having, you know, um, and more like a proverb of the week and a way of the week or something. You get just Give them reasons that and I think to a large extent, the more they perceive the joy, not compulsion now, the more they perceive the joy in you to see them speak the language, I think to a large extent, you're not going to have to even force the compliance at all. It will just flow naturally for them. All right. So give them reasons to speak and not instruct them to speak. All right. It's important that you should understand that mockery can change their behavior. So, as much as possible within your power, try to mitigate that. Right. So, try not to create any language shame at home. Try not to create any language shame. I've said that before. Don't say things like Yoruba is terrible. You should know this by now. What kind of Yoruba child are you? Don't laugh at their pronunciation. Then constantly correct, comparing them with their cousins. I said that before. Turning every family gathering into an into an oral exam. Please don't do that. Don't let people go. Oh yeah, come. What is Ebola law? No, don't do that. Don't. What you want to do is you want to create that environment for them to speak generally. You don't want them to have any resolve in their head that I'm bad at this and I don't think I want to make any extra effort. All right. Very important for you as a parent. So let's go to the last part you where it now becomes on you where you stop fighting for compliance and you start building desire. So how do you help them to build desire to really speak the language? So create small wins. All right. Create small wins. And this is really one of the things that we are very good at here at Tayari.live. You can check our website. You have about 20 minutes of free session per day. So you can give it a shot yourself, see what the experience looks like. Those small wins. We also have the AI grammar that helps to engage your child in the pronunciation and all of that. Amazing experience is something that you want to test for yourself. All right. So create small wins. Like I said, once your children can perceive the joy in you, wanting them to speak the language, it would automatically be a no brainer. Automatically be a no brainer. All right. So have weekly activities. For example, a 10 minutes Yoruba only game and story. All right. Um, it could even be a short clip, a short movie or something. All right. So one daily routine, something like maybe a voice note to grandparents. Just let them give it a shot. All right. And of course, let your grandparent, your own parents know on time so that they can, express their own excitement, back and all that. And then maybe a 5 minutes chat before bedtime. I've often said this. I'm a heavy proponent of parents making sure that your voice is the last thing that your child hears before they go to bed. It's very imperative. So remember, one phrase at a time, one weekly activity, just one. Again, don't overwhelm them with too much at the same time, just one at a time. And I think that will be good. So remember, let's move away from pressure to participation. So build desire, don't force. All right. You also speak it naturally. Be an example, right? Create more opportunities. Don't drop demands. I've said it before. This is just to reiterate all over and over again. And remember, very imperative. Praise the effort, not just the accuracy. Very important. Very. Don't say, "Hey, now you got it this time." No, every single time you did good. As you're noticing that the pronunciation or the intonation gets better, it is still you did good, right? I think to a large extent the child themselves will begin to know that they are doing better, right? So you don't want to save your praises for accuracy, even when they've shown effort. Praise the efforts. And then the last thing is, naturally, if you do all of that, their their vocabularies will just begin to upgrade and all of that. So remember, the goal is not perfect Yoruba. The goal is a child who feels at home in Yoruba. I think that's a powerful line that you should keep at heart. The goal is not perfect Yoruba. The goal is a child who feels at home in Yoruba. All right. So that being said about that, so remember, don't give up on the language. Give your child a better relationship with it. Language is memory, language is identity, language is family connection. So If you do all of these things to a large extent, I think I know not I think I know you will help your child to bridge, you know, that that gap. And remember that they are not rejecting Yoruba. They haven't just come to the point where they are at home with the language. And that comfort, that convenience is really the overarching idea behind today's conversation. I think to a very large extent as a parent, if you are able to nail that and you're able to master that, you will get your child to come up to speed. Remember as well, don't just praise the accuracy of their pronunciations or the meanings, praise their effort. So, for an example, maybe they want to say, Mo fẹ́ lọ síbẹ̀ yẹn. They say something like, Mo fẹ́ jẹun síbẹ̀ yẹn. So, don't laugh, right? You know, of course, you know that the choice of words and the intent don't match, but still praise the effort for them to add, thought about bringing it up or not. And again, like I think I mentioned, one particular time. One other thing you can also do is this, which is a tip I did not put here, is you deliberately make mistakes of what you know that they know. So the feeling of them correcting you also make them feel good about themselves. That, oh wow, like I was the one I corrected mommy about, I corrected daddy about this particular word in Yoruba today. So deliberately do things and don't go. I deliberately did it so that you can know. Don't do that. Just like I said, because if you don't do this deliberately, it will not happen for them. Right? So deliberately do it, put them in a position where they feel at home with the language, and you'll begin to see so much of changes. So I think that's what I have for you today. Thank you so much for joining. I will definitely see you by tomorrow. But before I wrap up today's session, I want you to remember, as I earlier mentioned, that our Swahili camp has been moved forward. So we are no longer having the camp on the um, on the 16th to 20th of August, as I've been earlier announcing over and over and again. We needed to make that shift because of some of the plans that we needed to solidify for the best experience. So, but the form still is very active, and what's it called? There's a wait list, so you can also join that wait list. Make the payments like I've always said that the wait list itself, you can do payment of $100 to show your commitment ahead for when we're going to be fully ready to launch for the campaign as well too. So do well to be a part. Again, like I said, we're not going to be running from 16th to 20th anymore. So thank you so much for joining me today. I'm your host on Ashawa, and my name is Busola, and I will see you tomorrow for another amazing time. Have a great one and the rest of the evening. Bye for now.